The film opens with the year 1850 appearing on the screen. Soon after, a well-known writer makes his appearance. This writer was not from the area. He had traveled a long distance to meet someone. He arrives at a house and knocks on the door. However, the woman inside assumes he is just another visitor and asks him to leave. She mistakes him for a customer, unaware of his true purpose. The writer, however, introduces himself, clarifying his identity. "I am a writer, not a client," he asserts. As she opens the door, she immediately recognizes the writer and calls him inside. This writer had once visited this very house to meet her husband. Her husband's name was Thomas. The writer had specifically come to ask him about a certain story. However, the moment Thomas meets the writer, he reacts with disdain. "Are you insane? Have you really traveled such a long way just to meet me?" he exclaims. But the writer remains unfazed by Thomas's anger. He calmly explains that he is here to listen to a story. To persuade Thomas, the writer even offers him money. "I will give you all of my money if you tell me the true story," he says. As proof, he places his entire payment before Thomas. But Thomas refuses the offer without hesitation. He sternly tells the writer, "Go. Check the government records. You will find the story there." But the writer insists to Thomas, "I need to hear the real story from you. I don't want to check government records." Hearing this, Thomas becomes furious with the writer. He angrily demands that the writer leave immediately. Thomas also declares, "I know nothing." Disheartened, the writer prepares to leave. But before he can go, Thomas's wife stops him. She steps forward, apologizing for her husband's behavior. She kindly asks the writer not to take Thomas's words to heart. She explains that Thomas has never shared this story with anyone, not even with her. Now, Thomas's wife turns to her husband and pleads with him. She urges him to finally share the story of the incident they had endured. After much hesitation, Thomas finally agrees to tell the story at his wife's request. There was another reason behind his decision. They were very poor. They needed money, and this financial struggle also influenced Thomas's decision. Thomas calls the writer closer to him. Looking into his eyes, he warns, "I will tell you only as much as you can bear." Because this was not a work of fiction. It was a tragedy. Thomas takes a deep breath and says, "This was the event that changed my life forever." With that, Thomas begins to recount his story. In 1820, it was an era when whales were hunted in the vast seas. Whaling was done primarily because whale oil was rare and valuable. Most people engaged in the trade of whale oil. It was not just a routine business for them. Whaling and oil extraction were their passions. People were so invested in whaling that they even gambled on it. They would place bets on which ship would collect the most oil while out at sea. During this time, a man named Owen is introduced. Owen worked for a company and had a wife. This meant that he led a stable and content life. The company Owen worked for was a whaling company. As expected, this company was dedicated to the whale oil trade. One day, Owen meets with the company's owner. They inform him that they are sending a highly valuable ship into the sea for whaling. They further tell Owen that he will be hired as the ship's head. Hearing this, Owen becomes confused. He had previously been promised that he would be the ship's captain on the next voyage. But now, they had gone back on their word. Instead, they had chosen someone else as the captain. That person was named George. In reality, George was the son of the company's owner. To console Owen, the company reassures him that he will be made captain on the next voyage. Recognizing Owen's skills, they also decide to increase his wages. Considering this offer, Owen finally agrees. However, he firmly demands sign a contract stating that you will make me the captain next time. The scene then shifts to Owen preparing for the voyage. His wife, however, is unhappy about his departure. She looks at Owen and says, "Promise me that you will return alive and soon." Owen's wife also gives him a locket to wear, so that whenever he sees it, he remembers his promise. After that, the scene shifts to George, the young man who was appointed as the ship's captain. George's father is also present. He looks at his son and says, "My son, go and return victorious." Then, all the whalers gather at a designated spot. A huge crowd from the city has come to see them off. Among them, a young boy named Thomas is also introduced. Yes, this is the same storyteller who has now grown old. Back then, Thomas was setting out on his first ever whaling expedition. Along with other crew members, one of Owen's childhood friends was also on the ship. Following this, Captain George and Owen come face to face for the first time. And right from their first meeting, a conflict begins between them. As the captain, George asserts his dominance over Owen. But since Owen is his subordinate, he cannot do anything about it, because George holds the position of power. Eventually, the ship sets sail. After covering some distance, the ship starts facing difficulties while sailing. It appears as if the ship has gotten stuck at a certain spot. However, using his skills, Owen swiftly resolves the issue. It's evident that Owen managed to do this because of his vast experience. But Captain George is the complete opposite. He lacks both skill and competence. Seeing Owen's expertise, George is filled with jealousy. That's why he decides to take revenge on Owen during dinner that night. At the dining table, George humiliates Owen in front of everyone. He mocks him, saying, "You're just a commoner, the son of a mere farmer." Owen feels deeply insulted but is unable to retaliate. Since George is the captain, Owen has no choice but to stay silent. Frustrated, he walks away and tells his companions, "We need to get up early in the morning." It becomes apparent on the ship that commoners are looked down upon. They are treated as if they are inferior. The next day, George once again gives orders to Owen, and once again, Owen is forced to obey them. While doing his duties, Owen notices an approaching sea storm. He immediately warns George, saying, "A storm is coming. It's a serious threat to us. We should turn the ship around before it's too late." But George refuses to listen to Owen. Instead, he orders the crew to sail straight into the storm. As the ship enters the turbulent waters, they are caught in the violent storm. Owen desperately yells that they must turn back before it's too late. But George, blinded by his stubbornness, ignores him. He continues sailing the ship straight into the raging storm. This reckless decision puts both their lives and the ship in grave danger. Somehow, they manage to escape from the storm. After this, George gives Owen an order. "You will apologize to me in front of everyone, and we will turn our ship back toward our island. That means we will retreat without hunting any whales." But Owen tries his best to make George understand. "Look, try to understand the situation. We cannot return empty-handed. Many lives depend on us. People are waiting for us to bring back whale oil." Owen's words manage to convince George. So instead of retreating, they decide to continue sailing forward. Then, the scene jumps ahead by 3 months. Now, they reach a part of the sea where a large number of whales are present. They prepare their ship for hunting. Owen takes the first strike and attacks a whale. At first, the whale desperately tries to escape. But after struggling for some time, it succumbs. They pull the massive whale onto the ship. Immediately, they begin extracting its oil. For this process, someone needs to go inside the whale. Since Thomas is small in size, they send him inside. Days pass as they continue hunting. But now, they are facing a new problem. They are no longer able to catch more whales, and a bigger issue arises. They start running out of food supplies. Since they are unable to continue sailing ahead, they decide to stop on an island. There, they meet another captain who had also come for whaling. They all sit with him, and he begins sharing his last hunting experience. He narrates, "We had reached the heart of the sea. There, we encountered the largest whale in the ocean. This whale was enormous and had been given the name Great Whale. But then, the great whale launched an attack on their ship. Its powerful strike left the ship completely destroyed. During the attack, the captain himself suffered severe injuries. One of his hands and an arm were fractured. And as for the rest of his companions, they all perished." But they don't take the captain's words seriously, assuming he is just making up a story. So, that captain leaves from there. However, greed takes over them, and they become eager to sail toward that specific part of the sea, the place where the great whale was said to be. After this, they continue their journey, determined to reach that location. Then, the story jumps ahead by 14 months. After a long and exhausting voyage, they finally arrive at the part of the sea, exactly where the captain had told them about. And just as he had described, the great whale is also there. They prepare themselves, taking their weapons and boats to sail closer. As they proceed, suddenly, something strikes Owen's boat. Due to the impact, they are thrown into the water. For the first time, they come face to face with the great whale. It was exactly as the captain had described. At first, the great whale starts swimming away, but Owen's companions remain in their boat, waiting for an opportunity. Seizing the chance, they attack another nearby whale instead. They manage to bring it down successfully. However, the great whale witnesses this act. Seeing them kill one of its kind, it changes direction and directly charges at their ship. The massive attack causes the ship to begin sinking. George, who was watching everything from his boat, realizes the situation. Without wasting any time, he rushes back toward the ship. George quickly orders everyone, "Leave the ship immediately. It's sinking." One by one, everyone abandons the ship and gets onto their smaller boats. They also manage to grab whatever little food supplies they could find by chance. The next morning, they examine their sea map to figure out their next move, but their troubles are far from over. Before they can make a plan, another sea storm strikes. This storm makes their struggle even worse. During this chaos, Owen's childhood friend suffers a severe injury. As time passes, Owen takes care of his wounded friend. However, the rest of the crew sees him as nothing but a burden. Then, the story shifts forward by another month. By now, their food supplies have completely run out. They are on the verge of death, enduring the worst possible conditions. Just when they are about to lose all hope, one of their companions spots land in the distance. Feeling relieved, they begin sailing toward the land they spotted. As they get closer to the shore, Owen senses something unusual. And then, suddenly, he realizes it's the great whale again. The massive creature strikes their boats, damaging them severely. Despite the attack, they are pushed toward the shore by the powerful ocean waves. When they finally reach land, their condition is no better than that of wild animals. They had become so desperate for survival that they started eating whatever they could find on the island. George then instructs his companions to ignite a fire. His intention was that if any passing ship spotted the smoke, they might be rescued. The island they had landed on was completely barren and uninhabited. One day, while searching for food, they discover a cave. Inside the cave, they find several human skeletons. This horrifying discovery makes it clear others had been trapped on this island before them, but no one had ever come to rescue them. This realization fills them with dread. They start believing that they too will die on this island, just like the people before them. Determined not to meet the same fate, they begin repairing their damaged boats, preparing to leave as soon as possible. However, some among them decide to stay behind, choosing to live on the island instead. Owen's childhood friend is also among those who choose to stay. Before leaving, Owen promises his friend, "I will come back for you. I will bring help." Then, the story jumps forward by 48 days. By now, their condition has worsened significantly. They are barely surviving, suffering from extreme starvation. Then, tragedy strikes. One of their companions dies. Initially, one of Owen's friends prepares to throw the dead body into the sea. But then, they make a haunting decision. Instead of discarding the body, they decide to eat it. It was a horrifying and unbearable choice for them. But at this point, they had no other option. This decision fills them with guilt and distress. Yet, their desperation for survival leaves them with no choice. They consume the flesh of their fallen companion. At this moment, the story returns to the present. The aged Thomas is seen once again. He appears deeply dejected as he recalls how they were forced to eat their own friend. Just then, Owen's wife arrives, tears streaming down her face. She is overwhelmed with grief after hearing the tragic and harrowing story of her husband. She then instructs Thomas to continue narrating the rest of the story. A month passes, and the scene shifts to show those people stranded at sea, caught in a desperate situation. They are in an extremely dire state due to the lack of food and are on the brink of starvation. In order to survive, they engage in a high-stakes game of pressure, where the loser faces a grim fate. The loser is eventually consumed by the group, as they resort to eating him to stay alive. One day, Captain George loses the game. He hands a gun to his cousin and pleads, "Kill me. End my suffering." However, instead of firing at him, George's cousin takes his own life. The remaining members of the group proceed to consume his body. Days later, they spot the great whale once again. Owen, ready to attack, locks eyes with the whale. In that moment, he hesitates, and moved by something in the whale's gaze, he refrains from attacking. The whale, sensing no threat, then swims away. Many days later, a ship comes into view, and the crew aboard it notices the small boat belonging to George. They decide to offer their help. Upon closer inspection, the ship's captain is horrified to discover the remains of human skeletons on the boat. It is revealed that Owen and Thomas had been separated from the others, stranded on a different boat. In a critical condition and near death, Owen and Thomas manage to spot the ship. They call out desperately, and the ship comes to their rescue. They are finally saved, escaping from their near-fatal predicament. After some time, they return to their homeland, where the natives are astonished to see them. They had assumed the worst, thinking the men had perished long ago. Owen's wife had been waiting anxiously for his return. She approaches him, and they share an emotional reunion. On the same day, Owen and Thomas finally meet each other as well. Owen gives his whale pin to Thomas as a token of remembrance from their ordeal. Soon after, the company management summons Owen and George to recount the harrowing story they experienced at sea. As Owen prepares to leave, he feels that their story will not be believed. Before departing, he tells George, "Do your duty as captain. Tell them the truth." Initially, George fabricates a lie, but later he comes clean and tells the truth. However, the company members stick to their own version of the story, one that is far from the truth. We then see Owen, now with a second chance at life. He begins his new life, taking it one step at a time. True to his promise, He sends a boat to retrieve his friend from the island, but it is too late. His friend has already passed. Thus concludes the story of Thomas. After sharing the tale, Thomas asks, "Will you reveal it to the world?" The writer responds, "Yes, but I will give it a new twist, one that stays true to the actual events." Months later, we see the writer again. He has written a book about the events, which has made him famous. The movie ends with this scene.